Hey, good evening, folks.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Hey,
Yeah, that's mine.
I'm going to give my apology now. I'm of course I'm at work and it's kind of crazy tonight. So I have about half an hour and I'm going to bug out quietly when I need to. But I had a conversation earlier with Tracy to, those things we're discussing and voting on. I gave her my quick opinion and quick vote on a number of issues. So, we just still give input, even because like I said, I've.
Yeah, if he has to leave, I can speak for Mark.
Yeah.
Excellent. Proxy, huh?
Yep.
Yeah, something like that.
Bylaws, we don't have proxies, but
Well, if they're not in the bylaws, I guess we can do it. Doesn't say we
bylaws
can't.
don't start until January. They don't start until January 1st, right?
Is it time to start ignoring the bylaws yet?
Yes,
Oops.
yes.
God, sorry. I grew up with sarcasm. It's just kind of I have to turn it off when I'm in company. So with family I can use it. With company I have to turn it off. So
Okay.
hey, let's get started.
It is 7:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just want to make sure I know everybody who's here. Adnan, Deb, Stacky. Who is Stacky? That's Mark Takasawa. Takasawa. Oh, okay, that's right. Okay, Sue, I know you. Okay, got everybody in.
I got everybody in.
Cool, awesome. Welcome everybody, and I know we're going to cover election results later, but I want to say congratulations to everybody who was voted onto the board starting in January. So welcome, and I'm excited about the future. It's exciting. The first order of business is to approve the minutes of November 7th that Julie sent out earlier. So all of the voting members, I see Daniel's connecting right now, all in favor of approving the November 7th minutes, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, minutes are approved. Awesome, thank you everybody. I know Mark has a very short time frame, so let's just go right into a recap of Turkey Trot, which went really well. we were a success, but yeah, go for it, Mark.
I'll take it. Yeah. So a group of us met on Sunday to do a detailed review. Some people who could not be there submitted their input via email, and we put it all together. Came up a list of 37 changes for next year. I'll spare you going through them now. If you haven't seen that list, let me know, or Tracy know, and we will forward that list to you. But we came up with a whole bunch of different things that we're going to do differently next year. Some of the highlights of that are to cap at 2,500. This year we had 3,000, just shy of 3,000, and we're going to cap it at 2,500. We're going to change the 4-miler to a 5K, and we're debating possibly not selling shirts, but giving everybody a hat. Whole bunch of stuff. Like I said, I don't want to go too far in the weeds since it's already written down. You can read it if you want.
Mark, excuse me.
Yeah.
I think one of the big things is to go to a fixed start.
Yeah, it's another big one too.
That's a
and
huge
more
one.
volunteers. That was the other theme. More volunteers. And just one other thing to tie it up is the issue of shirts. I did a second order of the shirts, and I did a in-person pickup. Not too many people came, so at this point I will be mailing. Penny, my friend, my partner, she does eBay, and I'm learning all about how to do click and send, or click and whatever it's called, how to use how to send stuff in the mail. But I'm hoping to get that within a week, get in the mail within a week. So shirts will go out to people who want them.
Awesome.
But overall, Turkey Trot, all things considered, Turkey Trot was a success in terms of people.
And I will add to that a major success. Congratulations, Mr. Race Director.
Well, everybody. God, that's just it.
It was a group effort, honestly, and we all did a fantastic job. I will say, I know many of you, I just forwarded the financials from Valerie because she can't be here tonight. And because we got the service fee removed from the invoice, last year Turkey Trot made about $41,000, and this year it made about $55,000. So it was incredibly well done. You also saw all the comments. Definitely things we want to work on, but I think we're going to have a good handle on it next year and make some real good improvements. So thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Since I'm next thing here, Ralph's Run, it's a month away. Everything's on schedule. I've got all my 3 permits. Shirts are ordered. Hats are ordered. We've got the UCC, Forest Grove UCC crew coming in to make pancakes again. It's, everything's on schedule. The only big question, as always, is what's the weather going to be like? But we'll get out there, rain, shine, snow, whatever. Ralph's Run will happen. So, but everything's on schedule for that.
Awesome. We have an eNewsletter that's going out. This week's is the results newsletter. We have another newsletter going out by the end of December, and really selling Ralph's Run as the first event in the 5K, 10K, 10 mile plus and President's Challenge. So hopefully that will also drum up some participants too. Okay.
If I throw in one quick thing, sorry, that just because I'm just thinking of that, since it's our first run, something that's circulating right now. I'm calling it a template, because we've been talking about a number of different things that are new this year. The caboose run, a fund so people can help them afford races. Our new policy about being eco-friendly, a number of different things that we've decided in the last few months. And I've sent out a template in draft form, and we're going to kick it around a little bit so that when we talk about such things, we are consistent on the website, consistent race to race. This is our cup policy. This is what the red caboose is all about, so on and so forth. But that, that's being circulated. And again, if you haven't seen that, let me or Tracy know, and we will get you a copy of that template so you can give your input on those kinds of things.
Yes. And I thought it was a great start. I thought it looked great. So, okay. Daniel, I don't know if you have anything to report on a walk-in clinic with Carmen. He was saying he had some issues that he was dealing with, so he might not be on right now. So okay, we'll skip over that. The awards banquet. Okay, we all glitch with the awards banquet. But we do have it figured out. It is fixed. Instead of being at the Willow Creek Center, it is going to be at PCC Willow Creek Center. It's going to be at the PCC Rock Creek campus. And it's going to be a lunch instead of a dinner. So it will be from 11:30 to 1:30. We've reserved the space from 11 to 2. So we have time to set up and tear down and everything. And it was, boy, the manager over there of the room reservations was an ORRC member, so she took pity on us and gave us a discount. Gave us the discount that so we're only paying the same as what we would have paid at Willow Creek. So
cool. So
that is on track. We've ordered the awards. Everything's good to go. And we've notified everybody who's already registered. Hagg Mud, I think, is on track.
Is Ryan here? If not, I can speak for him.
Okay.
Yep. Excuse me, Tracy. One question about the awards. You're going to need help for those of us who will be volunteering. What time would you want us to get there? Would you expect, so we can block out the time?
I would say 11 to 2.
11. That's early enough.
Yeah, I think that'll be enough.
Okay. Thanks.
I'm doing a whole lot.
Yeah, I talked to Ryan last Thursday, just checking in on him on Hagg Mud, and the short version of things are on track. He's got his permits. Had started kind of good conversations with the crew there at Hagg Lake, and I did a check-in with him, and things are on schedule. Just part of it is just how can I say it's the details, and for that, referring him back to talk to Terry, like I know that Hagg Mud, for example, tracks the long time participants, 5-year, 10-year, and so on, and things like that. How do they track it, kind of thing? And I told Ryan to talk to Terry about those kinds of things. But as far as holding the event, it's all on schedule. and looking to be another good event.
Okay, great. I need to follow up. Great. I need to follow up with them because I submitted a request for November and from RRCA and I still haven't seen it. And they said it would take 2 weeks and that fell around Thanksgiving. So I know what the holidays thrown in, and they're probably, everybody and their mother was probably requesting insurance because it had just opened for next year. And they're probably focused on the January events versus the February, but I'll follow up with that and see what the status of that is.
Yeah, cool.
Mark, Champoeg, how's that going?
It's going good. I just checked today. We have 16 so far spread across the different distances. I
Okay.
did have a question on the 10K series. How would that be incorporated if people already paid for it?
The
Or
10K.
Champoeg by itself, but they want to sign up?
No, that we're not doing the 10K series anymore.
Okay,
So
okay.
what it is a 10K challenge, but they don't have to sign up for it. We will be tracking everybody who does the 10K. So there's nothing that you need to worry about with that at all.
Okay. And then I'll probably submit the insurance next week. And this week or last week, I talked to the porta potty people. So
Okay.
the only difference between last year and this year, was there enough porta potties last year?
I have no idea. I wasn't there, so I would assume I would assume if you haven't heard anything bad, that just order the same number as last year. Because
Okay.
they also have that the bathroom facility there. So
Yeah, and I was going to increase it by 1 because I think they only had like 4, but I was going to do 2 down at the water break and then 3 towards the front because we have the main facilities to use. And then I'm not going to do the water thing that was done last year, and the money saving from the water, the hand washing stations.
Oh, yeah.
Can be used for an extra
Yeah.
honey bucket. So
Okay. That's fine.
but that's about it.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Mark. Okay, let's just go into the big question of the day with garlic. I played on this. For those of you who don't know, I'm not sure. We got an email from Andy at RRCA, and he's their kind of event coordinator, saying that the 10K at Garlic had been approved based on Stephen's recommendation as the regional rep to be the RRCA regional 10K championship.
Yeah.
This is, I'll just give my thoughts first. I know we've had some email discussions going on. I just want Garlic to be simple this year, especially if we're going back to the old courses and the old start and finish area. I just want to focus on putting on a clean ORRC event that doesn't have any issues like it had last year. And honestly, with all the stuff that went on with the previous board transition and the previous race director quitting 2 weeks ahead of time and not having done anything really, that he is the regional rep. And if it is an RRC event, I have concerns that if he's there, there would be some tension. And I would prefer not to have any of that hanging over this event. I would just like it to be a clean ORRC event. With all the changes happening, I just don't want to mess with our RCA championship right now. But I'm also welcome to hear other people's opinions about this. Joe?
It's interesting that, yeah.
Let's start with Joe.
Oh, yeah, I'm just curious, did anybody at ORRC or with that's directly involved with the Garlic Festival actually submit a request or a bid for it to be a championship event?
No.
We don't know because we did not. This board and this current race director did not. But we don't know when the application deadline was. So if he submitted it back last summer before he left, I don't know. That might have been the case.
The way the process works, and is that, you know, a club applies to the regional rep to decide. And the thing it is that basically Stephen applied to himself and he said yes to himself to make that an RRC event. So, it's not, we were not involved in that process. And
So, so Tracy, regardless of how the process went, I think that's irrelevant. Normally, I would like us to do championship events. We did them years ago in the past. It's good publicity. However, what you said about this year, I think is absolutely compelling to me. So I'd like us to explore these things in the future, but this does not seem to be the one that we want to do it for.
Margie, you had something to say?
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think your ideas of bringing it back to the original course and focusing on doing it really well, because there were a lot of unhappy people after that last one, that let's not add in the additional complications of the RRCA championships.
Hal, what do you think?
Okay.
Hal?
Okay. Yes, I have tried to call Patty. I've tried to call the garlic people. I haven't talked to the city about it yet, but like this next week, I am going to go to the city and say, look, and what I left Patty a message. The reason we're going to move it is because nobody can get around North Plains. Nobody can get to the Garlic Festival. It's not doing us any good to have to argue with you about this. And she has not returned my call.
Hal, what I would, one of the things I should bring up, one of the reasons Hal is talking to them is Stephen actually emailed me and said that if we don't have it the week of the festival, we can't call it the Garlic Festival 10K, which I don't necessarily agree with.
What Stephen said, though, was that we couldn't use the garlic logo if we didn't have it with the Garlic Festival, but we're not using the logo. We don't have any shirts or anything that we're going to put the logo on. This year, I want to do socks like we've done in the past. They don't have the logo on them. We just call it the Garlic Run. And
I think if we talk to them about the fact that they requested that we move away from the festival.
Oh, yeah.
Logistical reasons, and we did that, but the place that we went to is possibly not going to be available next year, that this would be better for us and better for them. We can still advertise the festival and encourage people to go the following week. I'd love to have the mascot from the festival there at the start line to start the events. I think that would be fun. People to pose with the garlic thing. So I'd still like to be in partnership with them, but just make it logistically better for everybody. So that's the kind of the way I would have the conversation.
Well, I'm going to go talk to the city and the county this next week and say, we're moving it. We just can't do anything with the festival, the parade, all of their activities. We even had to, this past year, go to a neighbor's place to get water because they couldn't get water at the festival. The festival is just, they want to support their cluster of people, and we're not in that cluster of people, and they don't support us.
Okay. So we'll fill you in. I will let Andy and Stephen know that we're going to decline their request for this year, and let them, if we want to have one of our events be a championship event, we'll go through the proper application process. But for this year, we're just not doing it.
Yeah. For what it's worth,
From
an RD's perspective, as far as being a championship, whether it's a state, regional, or national championship, what we get are extra medals, an extra set of medals to give to people, and what we also get is free Gatorade. So that's the advantage of doing it. So. Definitely continue to do it in the future, just not this particular occasion. Yep.
And we get publicity, Mark.
Yes, that too.
Good publicity.
Yeah.
But not this year.
I agree.
Okay, treasurer's report. Did all of you see Valerie's information that she passed on? Right now we have in our checking, savings, and investment portfolio, we have a little over 355,000, and that's as of today. And most of the bills for Turkey Trot have been paid. I know we still have to mail the shirts and stuff, and there'll be some other things trickling in, but we are definitely in good financial shape. So,
Cool.
Right. Well, I wanted to mention that in the end of December e-newsletter, my president's article is going to be on budget, and we have a link on the website now to the budget. And I'll have the article is going to include that little snippet of the 1972 budget of $1,600. So I wanted people to be able to compare 50 years ago versus now, so they can see it. I just think that's a great story.
That's great. Yes, it is.
But we're doing great. So I feel really good about where we are financially. And I know we have opened up accounts at On Point Credit Union. We don't have the money in there yet. We haven't set up this. Valerie and I are set up as signatories, but that's all we've done at this point. I think we wanted to get through Turkey Trot and their end of the year and everything before we started moving everything. So that's done. Okay. Election results. Again, as I said before, I wanted to welcome everybody who has been elected to the board. I hope I don't forget anybody. Adnan and Susan and Debbie and Deb and Nikki and Joel. Did I miss anybody? Yeah, Susan. Yeah, and of course all you returning members all got elected too. So I just wanted to welcome you all to the board. We are going to put all of your names officially in the minutes so that we have documentation of the official board. None of you can vote yet because you don't get to vote until January 1st. But between now and January 1st, I will be working with each of you individually to set up your board member email accounts. So instead of getting an individual email with the agendas and things like that, you'll actually be on the board of directors email group. So you'll be able to get everything. So I'll just work with you individually to set those things up. And what will happen is that at the January board meeting is when all of us as officers will then elect, all of us as board members will then elect the officers. So this is where on that note, the next two categories, I'd like to kind of get everybody's feeling on who is volunteering to run for the officers. I won't say who will be the officers because that hasn't happened yet, but who is volunteering to be officers. I'm assuming nobody else wants to step up as president, so I am volunteering to be president for the next 2 years. And I know Deb Hall has volunteered to take on the treasurer position because Valerie would really like to step down. She's not going to be treasurer-elect. She's going to just go straight into the treasurer position. And so she and I and Valerie will work together to get all of that going. And two people. Yes, Alan?
Question about our bylaws,
Yes.
because I do want to get us official. Do we make nominations tonight based on what we're discussing, or do we make nominations at the January board meeting?
At the January meeting.
Okay, thank you.
We just wanted
Good.
to get an idea of who was going to be hopefully nominated for the different positions. There are two positions where the people would like to step down, but not necessarily right away. Mark Barrett is currently the vice president of race operations, and he really wants to just step back to be race director because he is race director for several events. So he would love to step down as race director, or VP of race operations. What he would really like for the next year is for somebody to either be kind of a VP of race operations, a co-VP of race operations, or a VP of race operations in training for a year so that he could then step down from that position because he really doesn't want to be the VP of race operations. So I would welcome anybody to contact me if they are interested in taking this on. or Mark, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Mark, tell me if I'm basically explaining this correctly. Basically, this position.
You explained it correctly. I mean, that it's where my heart is. My heart is in directing races, and I do like to mentor people, new RDs, and but it's I'd rather, how can I say, like, everybody who was, we're all looking for replacements, in the sense that we're all not as young as we used to be, and we need to be reaching out to new people, new blood, and this to me is just part of that, is to mentor somebody, so that we know that the club will continue to be in good hands for the years to come. So, but you have correctly described my situation.
And the VP of race operations basically is the liaison between the board and the race directors, kind of keeps them informed of what's going on with the board, helps keep them on track of things, of what they need to be thinking of and doing with their events, and just the VP of race operations, as Mark says so eloquently put it, he's not the boss of the race directors. He is there. He helps them to achieve what they need to do for their events. So, and the board really is that for everybody, but he's the liaison for the board. So that's kind of, if you're interested in that type of a position, again, please contact Mark or myself, and we can get that ball rolling.
And Tracy, what is the term of that position? How long is that?
We don't really have a set that one. That one's a more flexible position, more so than treasurer or president. So if the person wanted to be like a co-VP this year, or a mentor, and then take it on the next year, but they only have a 2-year term, it just kind of depends on where things fall. So the other position, Julie is a great secretary, but she also has a lot of other things on her plate, including 1200 Club and the eNewsletters, and we're doing some other things and stuff. So she would love it if somebody else would be interested in taking on the secretary position. And I would say the secretary position is one of the easier board positions, because you just take the minutes, and then
you create agendas, and you take minutes.
Yes.
And send them to Carissa.
Once they're approved, you send them to Carissa to get on the web. So it's one of the easier ones. So if anyone is possibly interested in taking on that, I would say contact me or Julia, and we can let you know what it entails. Julie takes extremely detailed minutes. There are also times when you've seen minutes of past meetings that have absolutely nothing. They're basically just copies of the agenda. I would like something more than that. But you don't have to necessarily be as in-depth as Julie is if you're scared of the positions. But if you're interested, let us know. Other positions that we're looking for, just coordinator positions. I'll just list them off. A lot of them we're doing, and we would really like to kind of take some stuff off of our plate. So if you feel like you can take this on, maybe a couple of you could take it on as a partnership or something. The member picnic on July 4th. We haven't really done anything with that at this point, but we do need to get moving on that and reserve a spot and decide what we're going to do for food and then things like that. So that was one. The race director workshops. We have one coming up on May 4th and one on October 5th. We were coordinating the May 4th one, so we will continue to do that, but we'd love to have somebody kind of help us with that. Yes, Alan.
I'm willing to go on that one.
Okay, awesome, great. We have some ideas. We really wanted to hold it at the library because it's a free source, and we think there'd only be like a dozen people there, so it wouldn't be a big thing.
And I'm also glad that you guys are willing to take the lead in the May, because I would need a lot of training.
Yes.
So yeah, good, thank you.
Let's see, volunteer coordinators, that's again currently Julia and myself. And the volunteer coordinator position, you've probably all seen the emails that we send out saying, hey, you got this email because you volunteered, and this race is looking for volunteers, and these are the positions they need. So it's basically sending out requests for volunteers sometimes on short, multiple times for an individual race. Mark's just sent us something saying, hey, I'm still looking for volunteers for Ralph's Run. Can you send something out? We'll probably send something else out again about 2 weeks before. We did it right before Turkey Trot, like the week before, because we were looking for some specific positions. So you're not in charge of the volunteers at individual events, but you're just helping to generate volunteers. So that's primarily trying to get emails out to people to try to recruit new people.
And keeping a master list. of
And
who-
keeping a
who has
master
volunteered.
list of
Who
who
has.
has volunteered at all of the events, so we know who gets the volunteer award in the future. things like
And
that.
coupons.
And coupons.
Just real quick, didn't Carissa mention something about, since that's a very important component to our clubs, races and so forth, that maybe having some type of a volunteer, what was it? Outreach, or Carissa, what was that you were mentioning about that? That maybe there were some people come together as a team to do volunteer outreach.
I guess I mentioned a few things, like
Mhm.
trying to build relationships with outside organizations,
Mhm.
maybe
Mhm.
even other running clubs, but people have mentioned
Maybe
like
even other running clubs, but people have mentioned like
and then having or maybe an orientation meeting, just so our volunteers know each other and maybe look forward to seeing the same volunteers at the next event.
Mhm.
I don't know. I had a lot of suggestions. I'm not sure. what
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
reading that though. So, and I
Had a
thought
lot of-
those were really great suggestions. And maybe with the volunteer coordinator taking on some of those. But I think also that as in the case of Julia and Tracy, there's more than one person working on it. So maybe that's it's more than one person role. But yeah, so that was something that I was thinking I might be interested in jumping into, and also then looking to find others to mentor into it. So
honestly, what we do with the every time we send out a volunteer email request, we actually go into RunSignUp into the membership database, because that's where people indicate if they're interested in volunteering. So
Right.
if they new members, we get a spreadsheet. We look at all of those who have indicated an interest in volunteering, and that's who we send the emails to.
Okay.
Now, we could periodically send it to everybody in our database, but we really thought these people have absolutely expressed interest in volunteering. So that's what we target it to.
true. Okay.
And then also the same thing for a lot of our events, which we haven't done, but with individual race directors have done, is contacted the local high schools.
Right.
Because or Boy Scouts or Scouts groups,
Mhm.
not Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts. So
Scouts.
Scouts in general, to get groups that can do easy things like aid stations and stuff like that, or handing
Right.
out medals and things like that. So helping the race directors find those groups. Let's see, annual banquet, we've already it's taken care of for this year. It's absolutely done. It would just be a matter of somebody maybe taking it on for next year. Probably need to find a new venue, because we have an exception for this year for the cost, but it's too expensive to hold it at PCC if we want to do that. So the other things, President's Challenges, I say President's Challenges, it's the 5K challenge, 10K, 10 mile plus, and President's Challenge. And basically what that is tracking everybody who's run these events to see if they've done all 4 or 5Ks, or and also tracking all of the working with the volunteer coordinator, because the President's Challenge is either participating or volunteering at all of our events, or 8 or 9 of the events, depending on if it's gold, silver, or bronze level. So that's one that would be, a lot of these are like background things. It's not stuff that's out there on race days. It's doing stuff behind the scenes, working with spreadsheets and tracking things and stuff. So, but tracking that stuff and letting people know, hey, you're still on track. That stuff and letting people know, hey, you're still on track for this challenge, are still going to do it. There's also the electronic newsletters that we send out. We send out 2 of those a month. One is a results newsletter or upcoming registration changes newsletter, and the other one is just a general e-newsletter, which we really like doing. So we wouldn't mind keeping that one if other people would like to take some of the other stuff. The equipment coordinator, Jeff Weirman, has volunteered to take that on. Wonderful. But he really would like some help if somebody would like to help him. And that's basically keeping an inventory of what's in the garage, making sure if something's broken, it gets fixed or replaced. It gets fixed or replaced. Going to have possibly quite a bit of work in the month of January, early February, if we plan on moving everything from the storage units, which is the next topic on the agenda. So if anybody's interested in helping Jeff is wonderful. If you've never met him, he's fantastic. Membership coordinator is currently Margie, and I didn't know if Margie, you were still interested in keeping that one.
Sure. There's more work that I need to do on it, definitely.
And then RunSignUp Coordinator with updates. That's currently Bonnie. We haven't really done a whole lot with that yet. So I haven't checked with her to see if she still wants to keep it, but she could always use help as well. And then technology is Daniel. And Daniel is wonderful at this. He is stepping down after next year. And so we do need to find somebody to replace him in that role. And that is basically helping, especially with the Google Docs, with the email assignments, with anything that happens with our technology. And so it would be wonderful if we could find somebody to kind of work with him over this next year with the intention of taking it on after he steps down from that role. So those are the things to be thinking of. The only things that we absolutely need to elect in January are the officers, but the other positions, we would love to kind of have people take them on. And if you're not interested in doing it, but you know somebody who might be, they don't have to be a board member to be these coordinators. So if you know somebody who might be good at it, who'd be interested, let us know, and we'd be happy to fill them in on what the job entails. Okay. Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
So you can put my name in for secretary, and secretary, I have up until a few months ago as secretary on a school board, a small school board. So and then I just had a observation that the race directors workshop that you have is the same weekend as the RRCA convention.
Yes, it is. Yes. And we are going to be talking about the RRCA convention because Mark had to leave, I think, right? Yes. I talked with Mark, and he has a suggestion for who goes. And we had asked the new board members, so we'll save that one, but we do know it's the same weekend. Yes. Okay. Transfer storage to new location. We sent everybody information, and I talked with people at Public Storage, the gentleman there, and he gave me some numbers going back to 2019. I know we moved there prior to that, and in 2019 we were paying $678 a month for the one unit, and that cost is now $1,098. And so I know based on when we first started, that cost has more than doubled in just 7 years. And so it might have been a fantastic location and justifiable expense back then, but it's only going up, and it's not going to, they gave us a discount for one unit for 6 months for like $150, but he told it's going to go up. It's going to continue to go up. And so that's why we did the research. So we looked at this U-Haul location that had storage facilities where they rent the trucks and vans. So it was super nice. And they have somebody there during business hours. So you have all of the information. So I would just, as far as I can tell, most people are very open to moving all of our stuff, to this new location, even though our units, because it will save us a significant amount of money. And it's where the trucks are. So those are the two big pluses. So anybody have anything to say pro or con to the move?
The question that I always ask in a situation like this is, can you think of any potential problem? Because this seems like a no-brainer. Is there anything that you haven't considered?
You have to spread our equipment out over multiple units, and they're not all together. And so it might be a little tricky, but if we can organize the equipment in logical allotments,
okay,
I think that could resolve that. I haven't talked to U-Haul about, are they going to raise their prices every year like Public Storage did?
The answer is yes.
Probably, but at least we'll be
Probably.
starting out at a much lower starting point. Joe, yes.
Do we know what the hours of operation are? Are they open early in the morning so we can get things out before a race?
Yes, well, they usually open, I thought they said 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
So you'd have to get stuff before, the day before, but we do that anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then they're open till like 7 o'clock at
7
night
or
or
8
something
night.
like that. So there's plenty of time to get stuff back. Except for holidays. The only day they're actually closed is Christmas. That's why they're open all the time.
Okay.
7 days a week.
Yeah. All right. Nice. Sounds good.
That's excellent.
So
Daniel?
is it worth looking around at a non-rental facility like, I mean, like an old warehouse somewhere that's not, I mean, there are a lot of these industrial parks right now that have small units in them that are just sitting there empty. And I'm wondering if it's worth making a phone call or two to those. I just think that the cost for the storage is just, I think it's just incredibly high. And I really appreciate you guys doing the work to try to get that down. Unfortunately, you know, I still remember the days of the Orc Locker where it came with the rent.
Yeah.
And
Storage.
and so
Those were the days.
yeah, it was the days for sure. And I know that they moved to this other place because I know that it was very, very convenient. It was only 10 blocks away, and it was an easy transition. I don't have an issue with what we've done. I think your solution is as good as any out there. Is it worthwhile for me to make a few phone calls? I've got a couple of ideas. There's a place over here near the freeway that we used when we moved stuff over, and they were just incredibly low, and but we don't have the luxury of having the trucks right there, but it's right on the freeway, right at Bethany and the freeway right below the great big billboard. And they're a small business owned by a family business. So I would love, if we're going to go the hired locker route. I'm sure you guys have already researched this, but it seems like it's the one expense out there that I can't wrap up my hands around, that we're spending this much on this. I know we have to. So I think it's as good a solution as I can think of. I'm trying to think of other solutions as well. So I mean, if you're going to need to lock in for a year, do we need 6 lockers? Or are we going to start sorting stuff through here and find out that maybe we don't need 6? Maybe we can get by on 3 or 4 or 5 or something.
The lockers that are available are a lot smaller, but I think the first thing we need to do is take some time to make sure we have what our inventory is and what we need to keep and what can we get rid of, if anything. And if we can't get rid of anything, how can we organize it, and could it fit into maybe 5 instead of 6, or see how it would go. We want to make it as simple as possible for the race directors, but we also don't want to make it so they're jammed in so tight it's hard to get stuff in and out without causing a problem. I have no problem if you want to go and research a different unit, a different size unit, to save on costs. I think it's going to have to balance against being where the trucks are is a huge pro for doing it.
I think we can organize 6 easily. We just, as long as we have some kind of a legend that your race stuff is going to be in number 4, so you'll only have to hit the master locker and then the one that's got your stuff in it. I think we could probably make it pretty easy to navigate for race directors. I have
Daniel, knowing Jeff is real organized. And my guess is that Jeff can do that, so that the afternoon when a race director picks it up, Jeff will have told the race director exactly where the stuff is. So one thing you might want to do, Daniel, is ask Jeff what his guess is on the square footage necessary if you're all going to look at other spaces.
I think I'm okay to go along with this solution. I mean, having the trucks there is good. U-Haul, they also have a 24-hour number. phone number if there's issues. It's a national company that everybody knows. And
Get stuff dropped off.
and this one is actually an area headquarters for U-Haul too. So it's also, I mean, there's only 2 on the west side that are like that. So I think it's really a good spot. I'm okay with it. I take a look at that line item and I'm like,
We're gonna try and get it down. Try and get it down. Is I'm going to tell Jeff to start doing an update on the inventory with the goal of having an idea of what we need to keep and how it can be organized. And that will let us know then what we need at the U-Haul site. And then we can start the process of renting. We'll probably have an overlap of a little bit of time while we rent and then move. And then, you know, we have shelving that has to be moved and stuff like that. So, but we'll start that process of inventorying and start the process of the move. We wouldn't move anything until after, well, obviously, probably end of January, probably early. I would like it if we could move by early February so that we're done by the time Hagg Mud rolls around. So we're done there. And so it's on track on, you know, everything's all done for the other events. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. RRCA Convention. Okay. I had sent out a proposal and Mark had, I talked with Mark, and here's the thing. I really, really, really want all 6 of the new board members to go, because I think it would be a learning experience. I think it would be a bonding experience. I think it would be a great training for you and let you know what what it's all about. And so I really, really would like to have all 6 go at one time. We could send like half now and half next year, but the history of the event is that it's been on the East Coast primarily, so it'd be more expensive to send 6 next year. So I really would like you to send all 6 now. In talking with several board members, I know they suggested that I would go as a mentor and kind of be a buffer between the new members and the regional rep, who shall not be named, at the conference. But Mark had a suggestion, because I honestly, the race director workshop is that weekend, and I really am committed to doing that. Mark would really like to go to the RRCA convention. He used to be the RRCA rep, and he really likes the convention. So our idea was that he could go as the senior board member to kind of be as the mentor to the new people who are going. So you have one experienced convention person and the 6 people who could all go together. So that would be my amended proposal, is that we send the 6 new people plus Mark to the convention in May.
Do it.
Yes, and I liked how, Alan, you provided some lower cost airfares through Alaska that I thought was, that let's, yes, it's a yes.
And for all of you new people, most of you got back and said you'd be able to go or interested in going. And so hadn't heard from Susan and Joel or Joel. So Susan Cooper, were you able to go? Were you able to figure that out?
I would be willing to go and able to go.
Able to go. Okay, so we just need to confirm with Joel. He was checking on his schedule to make sure he could go. So, okay, awesome. That would be great.
And Tracy, in terms of the conflict with the race directors workshop, if one or more wants to attend that, there's always the October workshop.
Exactly. Yes. If any of you want to, take advantage of the training of the race director workshop, we do have another one in October. And we can also provide you with all the resources that happen at this one. We're going to we have the manual. We're going to have a PowerPoint presentation. We'll get you all the information if you're interested in doing that. We are still looking for a race director, co-race director for solstice run. So, okay. Awesome. That's great. That's that proposal, the budget proposal. We've got that taken care of. I'm going to let all of you work with Valerie on then making your travel arrangements. But I will send you the link to the RRCA convention registration page, an information page, so you can all register. I think, can we register? I don't remember if we can register you for the conference, but then you make your own travel arrangements. But we'll figure that stuff out because it's not until May. We have lots of time. We'll get back to you on that. Okay. Awesome. Proposal. Okay. The next item was the refund policy at ORRC events. And this is something that we have not been consistent about. And so usually we just kind of leave it up to race directors to decide what they want to do. Mark told me in our conversation earlier today that he is really into trans races. If somebody contacts him 2 weeks before our event and say, hey, turn my ankle, can't do it, I want a refund, he'll say, well, I won't give you a refund, but I can transfer your registration to another event. If it's something more serious, like, hey, I was just diagnosed with cancer, I can't do this, and he'll issue a refund. So it's kind of up to the death in the family, whatever. It's up to the race director's discretion. But I didn't know if we needed to have a more consistent policy across our races. I think that would be helpful.
It would be fair for people also. Very fair.
Yeah.
Mark was also talking about transferring. He has transferred registrations to other people, like a friend of a runner who can't run. They'll just get a transfer to a family member or a friend. He's done that. I don't,
because that messes up with the registration.
I think that kind of messes up the registration a little bit because they haven't signed the waiver versus the person has. It gets a little bit trickier with that. So I'm not as much in favor of transferring to the person, but
and transferring to the race. The race is nothing.
Transferring to the race. Here's my take on it. Only because we were dealing with this with Garlic and with when Hagg Lake Road was canceled last May. They transferred their registrations to other events, and then people would contact us and say, "Well, now I can't do this event because of whatever reason, and so now I just want a refund." But there's no money left in the fund because the account has been closed because RunSignUp moves our money out of the account very quickly after the event ends. So we don't have money just sitting there giving refunds to people months after the fact. So if we're going to offer a refund, it has to be really before the event happens. So I guess I'm looking for guidance on what do you all think should be. Yeah, Ellen.
So you said if it's before the event, we can get a refund out?
We can do a refund. Because money's still in there, but we say on the registration, this fee is non-refundable. So it's just kind of up to the race director's discretion if he's going to offer a refund to that person based on what circumstances they provide.
So two things. One, I would say a 2-week refund's available 2 weeks before the event. And the other thing is I think it's important for us to be consistent because if I know somebody who got a refund at a race 6 months ago, and then I'm not getting a refund today, I'm going to say, but you gave them a refund. So I would say consistency is number one in my mind.
Susan?
Yeah, I have a question. How often does this come up? Is there 1% of the racers that register, or is it just like a couple people per race?
Yeah, it is not a lot of people. I would say the circumstances where I've seen it most recently has been when we canceled the events, obviously we offered them a refund or a transfer. I know like in the longer events, like Vernonia, if somebody contacts him and says, hey, I was going to do the marathon, but I can't, I injured myself or something like that. A lot of times they will transfer it to the next year's event if the person wants that. In terms of refunds, was it Turkey Trot? When Turkey Trot registration first opened up, it was advertising medals and we weren't going to do medals. So we contacted everybody who had registered at that point and said, if you want to cancel, we'll give you a refund. But for the most part, it's pretty few and far between. It's just a case of people will contact somebody 2 weeks before and say, oh, I got sick and I just don't feel like I can do this run now, or something's come up and I can't make it anymore. Can I have a refund? And sometimes they're more giving with their reasons and you're sympathetic, but it's like, well, that's the risk. That's why you run the risk of when you register early. Daniel, I know, said that he usually gives them. I personally would prefer to give refunds versus transfers because logistically it's easier, but I also know that you don't want to just give refunds to everybody who asks for It's just because especially if you've done things like ordered food or shirts or socks or whatever, you spent the money on that person, and if they leave, you don't have the money. So
My opinion is refunds are probably not a great idea. I've never done other races, like, for example, Shamrock Run or other races where there's any way there'd ever be a refund. You make the decision, you kind of gamble, you say, it looks like on May 5th, I'm going to be fine and I'm going to do a 10K. And then if something happens, you leave town or you're sick, that's just a gamble you took. Secondly, I really agree with what Alan said. If you're going to do refunds, you have to be consistent. Because that was one of the things that, unrelated to refunds, it seemed like feedback from the turkey trot that people were looking for consistency. I saw people who had medals and I didn't get one. I saw people who had chocolate turkeys and I didn't get one. You know, I think people have to be consistent. And I think that that could be something that would really irritate people if they knew someone had gotten a refund and then they didn't.
Yeah, I agree. Adnan?
Agreed. Yep.
Adnan?
Yeah, I can keep this brief because I would just echo exactly what Sue said. Just as a racer, I'd agree with what she and Alan said about keeping it consistent, because I would be pretty annoyed if I found out that somebody, you know, went on group runs with, you know, somebody, the race director or whoever, and, you know, they had a way into a refund that I just didn't know about. And I also agree that it is annoying for the organization. I would, you know, as a trail runner, I don't expect any refunds past like a certain date, for example. I think a transfer to that same person for the next year, I think, is a reasonable thing to do. But I think there should be a refund cutoff date, in part because you have to get to the like actual start line, you know, eventually. So if you know, getting injured is a part of it, deciding not to do it is a part of it, and I don't think the responsibility should sit on the organization. But I do think that it should be consistent across the board and should just be a policy thing.
Great. Daniel?
Well, I like the idea of keeping it, leaving it up to the race director, because clearly I'm in a minority here. But I also have an exception to that minority, which is I see, because to me it's a customer service thing. I want them to come back, and I want them to be happy. So if that's what's going to make them happy, I don't care if I give everybody a refund. But in some of these races now, we're having to put a cap on them. And Alan and Joe knew I was annoyed about this at the golf tournament recently, where we maxed out our field, and we had 2 teams no show. We had four golfers that didn't show up, and we had maxed out our field, so we could have actually filled those 2 carts with another team. So if we ever get to the point where we've maxed out a cap, then we have to pretty much be firm on refunds, because we end up losing money if we start refunding money where we could have had other people come and take that cap over. So there is that exception I would make if people are deciding to. The 2 times I had to do it were both, Carissa remembers it well because she was doing communications, 2018 dual. We had the heat on race day was 109, and then our rescheduled date, we had forest fires, and our smoke index was in the 120s. So we put it off to a 3rd day, and the 3rd day was still smoky and hot, but it wasn't 100. It was like 98, which is like 20 degrees less than it was the first time we did it. But we offered refunds to anybody that wanted them, and some people just said, "Hey, I'll take a refund," and others just said, "Look, dude, it's a $20 race. Move ahead." Or I think we let them move to another. We gave them a choice of any upcoming races that weren't called the Turkey Trot, and let them move to another register. So we offered, but we also had exceptions there. And Alan, you'll remember when Rob Rickard had the flood run at Champoeg, and we gave
that was a fun day. Yes, I do remember that.
I do remember that, and we had to give a ton of, And interestingly enough, a lot of people said, look, you're going to reschedule it sometime in the future. We don't know where, but when you do, we will just show up. And everybody was real nice back then. I don't think they are as nice now, but I think having a policy of as a rule we don't, but leaving it up to the race director, I think is probably the right play, and I support it unless we hit a cap.
So I think what I'm hearing is most people would prefer a transfer to another race or the next year's race, and refund would be like, I guess, to say a last resort depending on extreme circumstances, which is what Mark said. And case by case basis, up to the race directors. First choice, transfer them to another race, and last choice, refund.
I think transfer to another race is a logistical nightmare. I think transfer to another racer, allow somebody else to run in your stead, and change the racer. Because if they're going to pay for a $20 dual, and they say, well, let's transfer it up to the Vernonia Marathon, which is $75 or $80, that's not really equitable. I mean, that's
not going to happen.
No.
That's credit for another race. Yeah.
It would have to be a different. I mean, we'd have to put some stuff around that. But in the end, it's happened so infrequently that I think it's probably. I don't. And if we just do the refunding quietly and let the race directors handle it, I don't think there's going to be a solution. It's going to be a bad one.
Alan?
This is sounding like it's a policy decision. Do we need a motion on this? Would that help us? And if so, I don't think we could craft one tonight. I think it would have to be done in terms of January, because I hate when people try to craft motions in the middle of a meeting. But do we need a motion, and do we need a policy, Tracy?
Why don't we change the bylaw?
Yeah. Why don't we do this? Why don't we say we're going to contact all the race directors and let them know, poll them for their preference of what they want to do. And then based on those preferences, we will have a policy ready to vote on at the next board meeting. Does that sound
nice?
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Fair enough.
Okay. BibBoards follow-up. I have a box of 1,000 BibBoards in my garage.
Are you going to send those over to me?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask. Do we want to?
Yes.
The thing is, we can give, we don't have to give them all to you. What we could do is send however many we think we need to send to the current members, send them to GC, and they can do the mailing for us for that additional mailing. And then the leftovers I could get to you, so you could then send to new members as they join.
You're getting the notification. And Margie, are you getting notifications of new members as they register?
I don't think so, not yet, but I need to do that report. So.
Well, we're getting notifications on a regular basis when people either renew or join. And so as a membership coordinator, you should be
getting that.
So I'll figure out in RunSignUp how that works and make sure you're the one getting those, so you know who to then mail them to. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. And then the mailing supplies and so forth.
Basically just get reimbursed from Valerie when you send them off.
Got it. Okay, perfect.
Awesome. Community outreach. We've had a couple of questions about community outreach, and we had somebody who is going to be filling out a community outreach event application, and I guess on the application, which I didn't see, it said that she wanted to order things like safety pins and bib numbers. And I'll tell you, the organization is Tualatin Valley Parks and Rec. They host cross-country meets and track meets for middle schools in the area. And so they work with the different middle schools, and they provide the t-shirts and the training and the coaches, and they then hold, like they held 4 cross-country meets and they held 4 track meets, I think, in the area. And these middle schoolers learn about all the events and participate in them. And so they were going to request some funds to help with their program to encourage that. But she was concerned because in the application it said that they couldn't use funds to put on events. And as Mark's when we had a conversation earlier, he said the community service program was community outreach program was more for training programs than for events. And so we wanted to clarify that. It doesn't specifically say that in the bylaws. It says we will give money to community partners who help, I forget the exact wording. It helps promote running and fitness and things like that. So it doesn't say it in the bylaws, but I guess on the application it says it will not go to events. So I told her to go ahead and submit the application because in the context of what she's requesting, the pins and stuff, it's not like it's a competing road race with us. It's something to encourage running in kids. And so I thought it would be okay. But I think we needed to clarify if that's the case, we want to make sure what we're giving money to. So thoughts? Yeah, do we really care?
So our bylaws, I just wanted clarification. Our bylaws are saying that we cannot give community money.
No.
Oh, okay. So whose
bylaws are vague? It's the application apparently that somewhere in the application it says the money cannot be used to put on events. Basically, as Mark said before, we used to partner with other organizations if they wanted to put on an event. We didn't give them money. We would, but so the question is, do we want to adjust that to say maybe we won't grant money on the application for a road race necessarily?
or a competing race?
A competing event?
And
it's up to us if this event is a competing event. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
We're big, so we have more. We can decide what's appropriate because the board has to vote on all of applications. It's not like we're just going to start giving out money to people. So.
Okay. Good idea.
Okay. All right, so we'll change the application. We'll change the application and just leave it up to the board to decide what's appropriate or not. Okay. That's it. Topics for the next board meeting. I did want to make sure I put this. This is not on the January one. On the February one, what I'm hoping is to have Daniel head up, and possibly Alan has suggested it too. A strategic planning, or we use SWOT analysis. For February. So that would be like 45 minutes, do you think, Daniel? So most of the February meeting would probably be around this.
I want an hour.
1 hour, okay.
Is there a possibility to do that in person?
And
maybe do it, say, on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon.
I can't do anything on a weekend.
On a weekend.
Okay. Is there a possibility to do it, say, early in an evening in person? Because I've done strategic planning both ways, and if we could do it in person.
What do you think,
Daniel?
I'm fine finding a place to do it. Yes, finding a place.
So if you could find a place to do it just in our regular standard meeting time. So Tuesday evening, whatever that date is in February, the second Tuesday of February, that would be the goal.
Okay.
I'll find a place.
Okay.
Tracy, there was another thing that I was going to raise. Starting next year, could we consider moving our standard meeting time, say, to 6:30 instead of 7:30? Would that work?
I think we primarily did it because I know Valerie had some other commitments and she couldn't meet, but if she's not the treasurer, then is a possibility. It just means that she might not be able to make the meetings. So that was a time when everybody was kind of done with everything else. But how about we do this? How about I send out a poll to everybody and see if moving it to 6:30 or even 7 would be a possibility. So it's not so late.
Okay. And if Valerie is the one issue, could you put possibly Thursday on that poll? Just looking for possible, because for me, I'm a little bit older than most of you there, and by the time we finish at 9 and 9:30, I'm done for the night. So,
absolutely, totally understand.
Thanks.
Just a comment as far as in-person versus virtual meetings. Honestly, virtual meetings are better for me. I think a lot of people live on the west side, and I have a school-age kid that I, just barely got dinner out of the oven after choir to get here tonight. So just keeping
Yeah.
in mind that we all live in different places, and for a regular meeting to be in person means there could be people coming from the west side, from the east side. So
And Nikki, you live in the Dalles, don't you? Yeah.
Dallas.
Dallas.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
And
don't
I
know
was
where I'm going to
suggest-
be.
Yeah, and I was suggesting in person only as a one-shot event just for strategic planning, and certainly not for every meeting.
yeah, for a special meeting, I think that would just need some planning, but I can't do that on a Tuesday night.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. Okay, Daniel.
So for the new board members, I will be creating some new email addresses for you in the next week or so, and I will send them to you. And please try to log into them and let me know if you're having any issues. I want to be able to resolve those because we're going to be adding you to several group lists, and you will now have a new email address. I also have a video I've put somewhere to show you how to move your Gmail accounts into one account, so you don't have to keep monitoring multiple email addresses if you're so inclined. So I will create those there. I had one item on the agenda that I probably wasn't there for. Did we cover the walking clinic?
Oh, we skipped over it. We skipped over it. What can you tell us about?
I have no update, so we'll leave it.
Well, that's easy.
Well done, Daniel, well done.
Thank you. And I don't want to hold any meetings at any time that we don't have our treasurer. Alan will tell you, when I was on the board, we had a major problem when the treasurer did not come to meetings and also came with no report. So I want the treasurer at our meetings, every meeting. So if we need to find a time, Valerie can be there.
Well, she's not going to be treasurer after January. It's going to be Deb. So
Oh, okay, great.
I shouldn't assume that. I should say.
Okay, very well.
Deb has volunteered to take on the role of treasurer.
Perfect. Then I even have less of an issue now.
Okay. Okay, I wanted to just also give you a final note, give you a heads up. The topics for next month's board meeting in January is going to be slightly different because this is also the annual meeting of all members. So there may be a lot of people who are coming to this meeting as the annual membership meeting. And so we're not going to do our usual standard agenda. It's basically going to be electing and introducing the officers to everybody. It's probably going to be introducing the entire board to everybody. I'm going to present the budget that has already been approved and let people know that it's going to be that it is on the web, so they can look at that and kind of let them know the state of our finances. I'm going to just give a brief state of the club address. We're going to have a Ralph's Run recap because that will have just happened, and a President's Challenge update and a Q&A for members. So it's going to be kind of short and sweet, different topics than we normally have, but so it'll be run a little bit differently than our usual agendas, just so you know. And I have no idea how many people are going to show up. We had 91 people vote in the election. I assume fewer people would attend the annual meeting, so I'm anticipating it's going to be less than that. But just to kind of give you a heads up.
Is there a cap on how many people you can have on a Zoom meeting?
Yes, 100. So
Okay.
what I've done is in the next e-newsletter and the last one that had results in it, there's the annual meeting there, and I'm asking people to RSVP to let us know if they're interested in coming, so we can know if we have to increase that limit temporarily.
Okay.
No one has contacted us. I seriously don't think it's going to be an issue, but yeah, we'll see. Were there any questions from? I know you're all going to be new to the board next month. Are any questions on stuff you've been? A lot of you have been attending the meetings the last couple of months, so you kind of have an idea of how we're doing everything. But anything that you'd like us to answer or address before we adjourn? I'm so excited about having all of you join. This is going to be so cool.
I just have a couple kind of comments to come back to stuff we talked about. The President's Challenge. Can you hear me okay?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, sorry. The President's Challenge, the behind the scenes stuff, I could help with that if that's still something that you needed. And then changing the date. I teach classes at the gym on Tuesdays. And so like I have this one slated out. So if we change the time, I don't know if I could, or the
the day of the, which order of the Tuesday it is in the month. I don't know if that would work for me. So the survey would be awesome.
Cool. Awesome.
And I'm excited. Thank you. And I'm excited to go to that conference. That's super cool. And yeah, looking forward to working with everybody.
Good. Joe.
I just wanted to say how impressed I am with the new board and the newly elected board members, everybody that turned out to put themselves in the ring for being voted onto the board. And I think the transition has been great. So thanks, Tracy, and everybody for making such a smooth transition and doing such a good job with all the logistics of the club. It's just really, that's very encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's always nice. All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for attending, and we will see you in January. Well, maybe at Rouse Run. Maybe at Rouse Run. Yeah. See you in January. All right.
Thank you, Tracy.
Talk later.
Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.